Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. From wherever in the world you have decided to join us today, welcome to this our second day of the Global Security Perspective Symposium. My name is Curtis Busby-Earle and I'm here at the University of the West Indies at the Mona campus. And I am Senior Lecturer in Computer Science and in the Department of Computing in the Faculty of Science and Technology. This, our second day of our symposium, promises to be as interesting and as mentally stimulating as it was yesterday, where we heard some talks from our esteemed colleagues and scientists from around the world on topics such as climate change through a SIDS lens, artificial intelligence and smart cities and robots, with examples such as Amica, innovation with purpose, where we looked at people, planet, and the profit that we can try to attain through our endeavors. And of course, machine learning and how secure we are in this age of artificial intelligence engines such as ChatGPT. Today, we have with us again a number of esteemed speakers and experts in their own right and in their own fields, all with the same central theme of security. So we will be hearing today from Dr. Nia Tuka, Dr. Goodridge from our sister campus in St. Augustine, Professor Lisa Dion Morris, and Dr. Curtis Charles, who's from our sister campus in Antigua. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are concerned about global security threats and interested in gaining a deeper understanding of the challenges we face today, this is the place to be, and we are always welcome to have you, and that you have decided to spend some time with us. Time, of course, which is a very valuable resource, but we are always pleased that you are here to join us. And we look forward to hearing and seeing your engaged conversations and questions. The floor will be open at some point in time during the course of this morning's proceedings. So without further delay, please allow me to not enjoy. I am looking forward to enjoying, but please allow me to introduce our first speaker. He is Dr. Danny Nyatuka, and Danny comes to us from the University of Strathmore in Kenya, and his particular area is in health security through ICT design. Dr. Nyatuka, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Once again, maybe let me say good morning, good afternoon to everyone who is in this forum. I'm grateful to be on board, and thank you so much for having me. I'm right now in Kenya, and that's my country. That's where I operate from. That's where I work. That's where I live. From Strathmore University, specifically, and I'm going to make a presentation this morning on health security through ICT design, because my background is ICT, and I'm also a lover of design as a methodology, as a very important ingredient that adds a lot of value to service development, no matter what kind of service, because design can be applied in any domain. And so I love working on design alongside IT. So I believe that you are going to enjoy my presentation. And so I would like us to move straight into the presentation. So next, please. Next slide. Okay, so basically looking at health security in general, you realize that we are working with a number of stakeholders. There are many factors that are involved when we are talking about the health security. I'm not talking about the health security in terms of digital security per se, but I'm talking about security in the context of design. There are many ways we can use design to improve the security of ICT solutions, e-health applications, health IT technologies, and all that. Uh, Design plays a key role. Actually, most of the IT applications that we have around, their security is mainly anchored on the design aspect, how they are designed. So I'm going to approach health security from the aspect, using ICT, of course, from the aspect of design, how we can actually identify, select, um, integrate, and use ICT in terms of hardware, software, and all that, to make sure that we achieve health security, of course, in the context of ICT. So if you look at the diagram in front of you or on the screen, we have an ecosystem, and this ecosystem is basically ranging from individual citizens to the community, to the organization, and to the authorities. Yeah, authority which is at the macro level. Authority here could be international organizations like the WHO. Authorities here could be the government, or of specific countries like Kenya. Then, when I'm talking about organization, I'm talking about hospitals. I'm talking about medical research institutions. I'm talking about community health facilities. I'm talking about referral health facilities, and of course, other people, players who play a role as far as the health security is concerned in our society. When we are talking about ICT, of course, we use ICT, all these people, all these stakeholders use ICT to ensure that we achieve our health security goals in our context, in our community, in our country, in our regions, wherever we are. So we want to use ICT to bring all these stakeholders together, because each and everyone will be participating and contributing towards a health security. So please, at the back of your mind, know that we are looking at ICT in terms of integrating services and bringing all these players together, and we'll be able to improve our health security. So before I move out of here, I'm talking about looking at ICT design in terms of individual level, that's the citizen, even in their homes, moving to their community. That's we are talking about a larger group of people moving to the healthy facility or a hospital which has personnel, staff, health professionals, and of course moving to the authorities, that's the government, Ministry of Health, and also the likes of government partners like the WHO and all that, who come up with certain policies that we need in order to be able to improve health security. Hospitals who have to implement these policies which are coming from above, that at the macro level. Then we have the community level people also who have to implement some policies, community health facilities, and of course, citizens themselves who have to follow the rules and regulations, policies that have been set by the authorities. Okay, so let's move please to the next slide. Now, I would like to divine on key concepts that matter in this presentation, so that we can be able to flow together to be able to understand exactly where this presentation is coming from and where it's going. When we're talking about ICT design, we are talking about basically those activities that involve usability features, okay, of an ICT product, and they contribute in terms of determining the product aspects, yeah, that meet users' needs. So this issue is very, very, very important if we are talking about ICT design in health security, because then those ICT products that we are using to enhance health security must meet or should meet users' needs. These could be health professionals, this could be the people themselves, the citizens, and all that. So when we are designing them, we have to be conscious of the context in which they are going to be used. Let's move to the next stage, please. Global health security, as we know, is basically those activities that could be either reactive or proactive that have to be undertaken in order to minimize or mitigate the impact of acute public health events like COVID-19 or an outbreak of a disease, yeah, at any given point in time. So we have to position ourselves in such a way using ICT design that at any given point in time we are confronted by such a phenomenon, we are able to navigate through, to guarantee the safety and health of our people. Next, please. Now, my presentation is focusing on underserved context. Underserved context here, we are talking about people who are marginalized, people who are devoid of primary health care or services, people for one reason or the other cannot be able to access health resources or services like the privileged groups because of geographical barriers, because of maybe population characteristics, because maybe being in a rural setup as opposed to people in the urban areas, because in the urban places we know the infrastructure is generally good as opposed to the people in the rural areas. It could be because of cultural affiliations, the people and their culture, can be isolated or marginalized. It could be the underprivileged people. So it could be the location or the geographical area, a place is located. So there are many factors that can make people to be underserved in terms of lack of access to adequate healthcare facilities and the like. And like in sub-Saharan Africa, we know this is basically the underdeveloped continent. Naturally, we know that the resources are scarce in this particular continent. And so you find that most of the populations, there are many populations actually that are ravaging in poverty. And even the basic needs are not available, and including, of course, the healthcare. So we are focusing on these particular populations, and that's why I'm talking about using ICT design to be able to improve access to healthcare for these kind of groups or populations, so that we can be able to improve health security in general. Next, please. Let me also talk about people-centered care. Now, people-centered care is a global policy that has recently been introduced by the WHO that as we deliver healthcare services, we have to ensure that these services are people-centered or people-focused. In other words, whatever healthcare interventions that we come up with, they have to be people-centered or people-focused in terms of tastes and preferences of people, capability of people to make use of these interventions. Because if we come up with interventions that will not enable these people to make good use of them to access health services, then we are jeopardizing health security. So when we are talking about people-centered here, we are talking about looking at the needs of the people. Before we give them solutions, we have to ensure that these solutions are tailored in such a way to meet their health needs, and specifically context-specific solutions. We don't want solutions that have been developed elsewhere. We don't want foreign solutions which may not necessarily meet the needs of the people in the context of use, but we want solutions that put the needs of the people first, so that then we can be able to maximize the opportunities that are presented in the name of health interventions, ICT being one of them. So we can actually design ICT that is people-centered, so that it can be able to deliver people-centered healthcare. When we say people-centered care, means we are looking at all stakeholders in healthcare space. We are talking about authorities, government authorities. We are talking about healthcare professionals. We are talking about the community health workers. We are talking about the citizens themselves who are clients or consumers of public health services. So all these categories have specific needs that they need to be taken care of in order to be able to function effectively within the healthcare space. And if they function effectively, they are enabled through the solutions that we come up with, then we are in the process of actually enhancing or improving or guaranteeing health security. Next, please. Now, the background of my presentation is that the United Nations Vision 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals recognizes health as one of the fundamental requirements for human capital. Now, which is a critical ingredient for socio-economic development across the world. As a result of these requirements, the healthcare system is under pressure from ever-increasing global demand to adopt a people-centered approach to healthcare in order to meet, of course, the people's needs, to ensure that we maximize the whatever interventions or opportunities that we have to enhance health security. So the people-centered aspect, as we have had, is a global policy, which is an initiative of the World Health Organization that governments who are member states of the UN should actually implement as one way of improving modern healthcare. Next, please. Now, this is the framework for integrated people-centered health service, okay, that was developed by the WHO to guide the design and development of people-centered healthcare interventions. Now, this is a standard framework that has to be adopted across the board by various countries globally in order to be able to achieve this people-centered healthcare policy. I am going to focus on strategy number 1 there and strategy number 4. Now, the strategy number 1 is specifically talking about empowering the people and communities, families, so that they are able to make good use of healthy facilities, health services that are available. So you realize when we are talking about people-centered healthcare, we are talking about empowering people. And how do we empower people? We develop interventions that support people, that enable people to make good use of available health resources. It could be vaccines, it could be ICT solutions or interventions, it could be anything in the name of healthcare intervention. So this is a standard framework that guides service developers to be able to design those interventions in such a way that they are context specific, to empower people within their context to make good use of the available healthcare resources. Then there is the aspect of coordinating all sectors, beginning with, of course, the health sector. We can talk about maybe the medical research. We can talk about healthcare providers. We can talk about health policy makers and all that. All these sectors within the health domain have to be integrated in such a way that these people are able to work together. Remember, we talked about various categories of healthcare stakeholders who have various needs through various interventions in order to be able to deliver context-specific health services, which will in the long run contribute towards global health security. So this framework is very key, very important when it comes to designing people-centered healthcare services, including ICT interventions. Next, please. Now, the issue at stake. What is the issue? What is the challenge? In this underserved context, it doesn't matter what region of the world, an underserved context is an underserved context. Challenges may vary, but at the end of the day, the issue here, or the bottom line is inadequacy of resources for people to be able to have access to health services. Yeah, inadequacy of access to adequate health services for people to be able to experience health security or global health security per se. Now, the means to achieve a people-centered care in the complex healthcare system are not explicit due to lack of proper understanding of the overall health domain among stakeholders. When I talked about the very, very first diagram, which was showing us the various stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem, you could realize that indeed the health system is very complex, where we have the citizens themselves who are the healthcare consumers, healthcare service consumers, then we have the community health workers, then we have the community health facilities, we have the referral health facilities, we have government, we have government partners like the WHO and all that. You realize that healthcare system is very complex. The challenge is to implement a people-centered care approach is a challenge because sometimes the stakeholders don't fully understand the complex nature of the healthcare system. Efforts by governments to transform this healthcare into people-centered care, especially in developing countries, have failed. While the voices of the people, the underserved, their voices have not been heard concerning their health needs. There is that tendency to ignore these people, not to involve them in decision-making, policy decisions and all that, including the interventions that we come up with, to enhance health security, including ICT interventions, like e-health solutions. These people are not given a chance. They are not listened to, such that at the end of the day, the solutions that are actually developed are not context specific. They don't meet the people's needs. They are foreign designs which are being imposed on the people. And as a result, you find that the people are not adopting them. Not only ICT again, it could be any other, it could be a vaccine or, any form of intervention, healthcare intervention. So as long as it doesn't meet the needs of the people, people, of course, will not use it. People will not embrace it because there's no that sense of belonging, that lack of involvement. So because of that, that compromises the fundamental requirements of healthcare quality and safety. The people feel part and parcel of that process. Now, as a result, adoption of ICT to address this situation has not succeeded due to the nature of SDG. SDG 3 is on health. The requirements of SDG 3 poses a challenge to existing health information systems in the monitoring of health indicators in underserved context, particularly in Africa. Because of multiplicity, the nature of multiplicity of the kind of data sets that are needed by the authorities like governments, the WHO and all that. So you realize that because the people who matter there, that is the healthcare providers, you find the citizens themselves, the community health workers, are not engaged fully, are not involved, including the citizens themselves, or the consumers of these health services. So because these people are not fully engaged, whatever solutions and interventions that are being proposed by whoever are not adopted so that they can bring about or cause maximum impact, as intended, so that we can realize these people-centered care. Now, the aspect of not involving all stakeholders, listening to the voices of the underserved people, leads to inability to adopt or embrace these solutions that are being proposed, and that puts health security in jeopardy. Next, please. Now, what is the way forward? How do we handle this problem? How do we handle this issue? I'm just talking about methodologies. How do we handle this problem? Now, the solution here is to employ participatory and human-centered approaches. I know we are already talking about underserved contexts, which don't have adequate infrastructure, which don't have enough or adequate funds, and we don't know when these funds will be available. But we have to do something. We can think of what we can do at least to improve the situation in terms of engaging stakeholder analysis methodologies. The solutions that we want to come up with in these environments, we want to ensure that we use stakeholder mapping, which will enable us to be able to know who is who, to be able to understand who plays what role within the healthcare ecosystem, so that we can engage them and involve them, irrespective of what kind of intervention we want to come up with. But in this case, of course, I'm talking about the ICT intervention, of which we are going to see shortly afterwards. Then we also have to apply design thinking methodologies. That's why I was talking about ICT design, improving or enhancing health security through ICT design. So we have to also adopt these design thinking methodologies, and specifically called service design and co-design. Service design is an approach of design that is actually context specific, that is human centered, that involves and engages the people, trying to understand the nature of the current situation and to see how to get out of that current situation to make a better or towards a better future. Enabling the people through co-design to participate. We heard that the people in underserved context have not been given a chance to air their grievances, to give their voice. So the solutions are imposed on them. But if we use design thinking approach, then we are going to ensure that we are going to come up with solutions that are tailored to meet the people's needs. Next, please. Now, in terms of stakeholder mapping, the most important thing here is that to identify the different stakeholder groups, and we analyze them in terms of interest and power. Interest and power. You have to identify the various stakeholders and what is their role and what is their power. What kind of power do they have to have things done, to have things happen? If we want to change the situation, we have to find out who is who and who has the potential, who has the capability, who has the ability, who is able to make things happen, who is to be engaged here so that they can help in having the change objective realized, moving from the issue at stake towards the realizing the change objective. So power and interest are very key. For example, the government has power to implement and to do things. In terms of policy, in terms of funding, the issue is interest. Is the government interested in ABCD? If they are interested, or if they are not interested, what do we do to ensure that they are interested? How do we introduce this issue to them? How do we communicate it so that the government can be able to be interested, because they have the power that it takes to get to the next state? Now, the aspect of power also, that means you have to mind the people who matter a lot, the people of the capacity, people of the power to have things happen, to have things done. Very important. So when we talk about stakeholder mapping or stakeholder analysis, we are mainly looking at power and interest. Next, please. Okay, the service design aspect. It is basically a creative, human-centered, and iterative approach, through service innovation, and it has the following characteristics. Number one, it is participatory. Participatory so that we can have every stakeholder involved, to have every stakeholder share their grievances, to have every stakeholder have their voice heard. Context specific. We said we don't want foreign designs to be imported because they may not be able to deliver accordingly because there are variations in context. So this approach of service design ensures that whatever solution that we come up with is context specific to guarantee maximum impact within the context in which that particular solution is going to be used. That it is holistic and multidisciplinary. Holistic and multidisciplinary, it accommodates each and everyone. You find that as a researcher or as a designer, you even have other players becoming designers. If you are designing a solution and you are using this service design approach, it is holistic and multidisciplinary. It can accommodate people from diverse fields. Actually, we talk about research. It can accommodate that so that we can have expertise from different domains so that people can actually work towards coming up with one specific solution that can bring about maximum impact. Now, service design makes services more useful, usable, and desirable for consumers, and that leads to sustainability because it embraces everyone, it encourages everyone to participate, it listens to the voices of everybody. So at the end of the day, it guarantees sustainability as opposed to designs that are introduced or from elsewhere. Now, service design methods and techniques, of course, would include focus group discussions, co-design, case scenarios, sketches, service journeys, all of blueprints, of course, wireframes, and prototyping. So you realize that the techniques that are used are inclusive. They involve each and every person that is concerned in that particular space so that they can also play a role to guarantee sustainability of the end product coming out of that particular design process or design activity. Next, please. Now, this is the service design process model. This is the service design process model, which uses the double diamonds process model of the design council. And it begins with the discover, where you discover what the issues are, what the challenges are in a given context. As a researcher designer, you get to that environment, you try to find out, you try to investigate, you try to find out what exactly is the issue. Then you try to make sense of those particular issues. That's what we call divine. Now you try to internalize, to divine in your own understanding what exactly those situations mean. Once you have discovered and divined the situation, then you proceed to develop the appropriate intervention that you think can bring change. Once you've developed that solution, then you proceed to deliver it to the people to make use of it so that they can have a new experience. Now, basically here, you can see the mapping is from the problem. So you do analysis of the situation. That means the contextual, a contextual study where you create relationships. You try to find out who can I talk to, who are the people who matter in this situation. You engage them, you involve them. So you discover by or through contextual study, engaging the various people who matter in that kind of environment. Then, of course, from there you will determine what the change objective would be. At the far end, we have the evaluation stage. Of course, we want to test the solution we have come up with. We want to be sure that this solution is actually able to deliver according to the people's needs. It is supporting people's needs, being the outcome that is actually anticipated or expected. So the thing is deploy, of course, in the real world. That is the exact context. Evaluate, use of that intervention in practice, determine the impact, and then determine stability of the network relationship. Again here, looking at the nature of use of that new solution, we are also trying to understand the stability of the kind of relationship between the various players, because for this to be used effectively, it means that the right stakeholders should be using it, should be involved, should be aware of it, and they should either endorse it for it to be able to bring maximum impact to the context within which it is supposed to be used. So how well that solution is being used will reflect and will enable us to be able to understand the stability of the relationship between the various stakeholders who are key as far as the implementation of that solution is concerned. And then we will have, of course, services that will move us from the current situation to a better future situation. So that is how the service design model applies. Now, you can see there, discover, divine, develop, deliver. What we have there, ideate ICT-based service concepts. Here we are trying to find out exactly what do people think, what kind of ICTs in terms of hardware, in terms of software that the people are comfortable with. Based on the nature of the infrastructure that exists, people's capabilities, can they use maybe cloud technologies? Can they use mobile computing technologies? What kind of technologies can people use in this kind of environment? Being a stakeholder involvement activity, obviously, we are going to be able to identify the exact technologies. We are going to identify, select, choose the right technologies that are needed because everyone is involved here. Core design sessions. These are involving the people in the actual designing of this kind of solution so that everyone will have a say. Talking about things like the user interfaces, what should be the features of this kind of ICT product that we are coming up with, and lastly, evaluate proof of concept. The actual solution, ICT solution we come up with, of course, we have to test it. As we said, we have to test it in practice to be able to be sure that the people are comfortable with it. If they are not comfortable with it, there is real work to ensure that everyone is happy with it. That is all the stakeholders. It could be government authorities, it could be community health workers, it could be the service providers, it could be the citizens here. So we work together to ensure that everyone is comfortable. Next, please. So basically, I have explained about this. I was trying to talk about how we can do analysis of the context. When we are doing the analysis of the context, remember when I began, I talked about the macro level, I talked about the organizational level, then we have the target group, and we have the individual. That's the citizens themselves. So we do stakeholder mapping first to identify whom we need to involve and engage in this process of coming up with a solution, basically designing the ICT solutions. We have to do stakeholder mapping. Then we move to contextual inquiry. What kind of infrastructure exists? What about the needs of the people? Do they can they afford, the kind of technologies we are talking about? Are they IT literate? Yeah. What would they want to see? What kind of technologies they are comfortable with? Is whatever we are proposing violating their cultural, and the value systems? Yeah. Is this? What is their view? What is their thinking about the kind of technology that we want to introduce? Then we move to people-centered health service. So I talked about the people-centered service, which is actually a global policy that is an initiative of the WHO. Do these people understand what people-centered health service means? We are talking about all the stakeholders, right from government all down to the citizens themselves. Do they understand what people-centered health is? And if they don't understand, it is our responsibility as the researcher to help them to be able to understand what are the expectations, what are the needs in the people-centered care situation or scenario, and what is expected of each and every stakeholder to ensure that we deliver people-centered health service. Then, of course, we come to now specific needs and capabilities of each stakeholder group. If we don't take care of the needs and the capabilities of each stakeholder group, then, of course, that solution is not going to realize maximum impact. But if we, in this process, we take care of the needs and the capabilities of each and every person, then we will ensure that the intervention, the ICT intervention we come up with meets the needs of the people, and it's going to bring, cause a maximum impact within the context where it is going to be used. Next, please. So basically, at the design stage, we have to weave the stakeholder relationship network, opportunity intent. Here, we have to refine and try to understand the stakeholder relationship network to be able to know what will work and what will not work. Ideate ICT-oriented people-centered health service concepts. Here, we have to brainstorm to ensure that everyone is comfortable with that. Before we begin the design of the actual solution, we have to ensure that everyone understands and speaks their mind. Yeah, they exactly air their voice, and everyone is listened to. Step 2, define ICT-oriented people-centered healthcare service concept. When I'm talking about ICT-oriented people-centered health service, I'm talking about those technologies that are people-centered. For example, mobile technologies. Mobile technologies, technologies are basically people-centered because they support communication. They have user-centric features because you walk around with it. You are able to chat. You are able to send a text message. You are able to. So mobile technologies, for example, have user-centric features, and so they can actually qualify to be known or to be called as people-centered because they can be able to deliver people-centered healthcare. Then conduct the visibility study. Conducting the visibility study, of course, we say the context and environment vary. They are not the same. So visibility study will be able to tell the stakeholders whether a certain technology is advisable to be used in a particular context, not what will work for the people and what will not work for the people. Of course, taking into consideration various factors. Now, step 3, develop. Develop the ICT-oriented people-centered health service. That is the ICT product. Go ahead and develop it after fully conducting the visibility study and understanding things like cost effectiveness, affordability, and all that. Go ahead and develop this intervention. And of course, lastly, evaluate the proof of concept. That kind of solution that you have come up with, evaluate it by using it in practice and to be able to get feedback from the users as to whether it's working or it is not working. And of course, step 4, deliver. Once you have done the evaluation in terms of proof of concept, deliver the new ICT-oriented people-centered health service. Because at this stage, you are sure that as you make it available for use, it is definitely going to be embraced. It's going to be used by all the stakeholders, and it's going to create maximum impact because nobody is going to be left behind as far as that solution is concerned. Let's see in the next slide, please. This is basically an illustration of core design sessions, brainstorming, prototyping, testing, and learning. So the various stakeholders are meeting together. They are actually ideating. They are coming up with ideas of what basically they need. What would be the desirable future situation that they want? What should be the interfaces of this ICT design? Basically giving everybody a chance. Now, the researchers or the designers are here, and even the participants themselves are designers. So in co-design sessions, everybody who is involved is also a designer. They are actually giving suggestions, and actually everybody is a decision maker in this process. So you realize that in other methods or approaches, you realize that maybe it is the researcher or it is the developer who makes the decision as to the design interface, you know, the interface, the features of the product, how they are going to look like and all that. But in this case, core design sessions enable each and every participant, including the researchers themselves, to make decisions. So the right to make decisions in terms of the interventions that are being developed here comes from each and every participant. So there is equality in the way people participate and contribute ideas in terms of what they would like to see until we have a consensus as to what should be the features, what should be the characteristics of the ICT intervention that we are coming up with. In this case here, even the healthcare consumers are here. The people who are going to make use of that solution are here. Now, that guarantees health security. At the end of the day, we all move forward, all the people move forward and make use of that particular solution without anyone pulling apart, moving forward, and it brings about maximum impact, and as a result, it enhances health security. Remember, we said health security means any activity that we undertake, either proactive or reactive, that helps to minimize or mitigate the impact of effects of an acute public health event like COVID, disease surveillance and all that. So if we come up with a tool which has been agreed upon by everyone, every board, embraced by every board, that means we are going to succeed in achieving our goal collectively. Next, please. Okay, so basically at the end of the day, we have a collaborative design solution, okay? Collaborative ICT design solution, which now narrows down to 3 key things. When we're talking about an ICT solution or ICT driven solution, we are talking about basically information, because an ICT solution handles information, manages information, communicates information. So we will now narrow down to information. When I'm talking about information here, we are talking about what are the various sources of that information. That information is coming from who? That information is packaged how? In which way? That information, how does it flow across or among different stakeholders? Remember, we are looking at the stakeholders. So the information is coming from government, coming to the healthcare providers. Also, information can flow from healthcare providers down to the community, from the community health facilities to the the citizens themselves, who are the healthcare consumers. So here we are looking at information coming from up downwards and also from down upwards. So we are trying to look at this kind of information. Where is it? We are looking at the information flows, because when we are designing an ICT solution, we also have to bear in mind the kind of information flows from different sources across different stakeholders and all that. So in the course of core design sessions, we are able to identify the various stakeholders, the people sharing the information, the flow of information, across different directions and all that. Next, we are talking about communication of that information. What are the various channels that are going to be used to communicate that information? What is the language in which that information is going to be communicated? Because aspects of language barrier, can bring problems. Because if you are designing a solution for people and you are using a language that the people don't understand, for example, in Kenya, we are using English as the official language. There is a language we call Swahili, which is the national language. And of course, there is the mother tongue. There are various languages that are used by different tribes and all that. But in this case, if you develop a solution for people at the community level, and these people cannot speak English or cannot speak national language, they only speak their mother tongue, then that means that solution is not going to bring about the maximum impact that's expected. So that means it is jeopardizing health security. But if we design these solutions and use the language that the people in that context understand, the people are familiar with this particular language which is being used, then that means that solution is going to cause maximum impact. Also, the technological channels that we are going to use to communicate this information, look at the kind of infrastructure. Does the kind of infrastructure support the kind of channel we are going to use to communicate this information? Very important. Again, the core design sessions, again, will help the stakeholders to agree and to understand unanimously, move one direction, how the information is going to be packaged, how it's going to be communicated, what technologies are going to be used. Is it going to be a web-based tool? Is it going to be a mobile-based tool? Is it going to be a paper-based, or is it going to be a text message or something like that? Yeah. So using the likes of a simple text message, WhatsApp, email, and all that will be informed by the context and engaging everyone who matters in that environment. Let us move to technology. Technology, I am talking about hardware and software. Now, in the context of technology here, in terms of maybe hardware, we can talk about mobile devices, we can talk about desktop computers, yeah. We are talking about basically various devices that people can use to be able to access this information, communicate this information with ease. We are talking about things like software. We are talking about Android, so that if we are using mobile devices, then we are using Android, which will support mobile technology, communications, and all that. Now, the kind of technology, you look at the various factors like affordability. Can the people afford this? For example, I know in my country, in Kenya, we are using mobile technologies a lot. Why? Because of affordability, cost effectiveness, and the user-centered, aspects or features of that technology, because you can access information from wherever you are, you can make a call from wherever you are, you can receive a call from wherever you are. That is an aspect of people-centered. So we are talking about those technologies which have people-centric features, that they can be able to comfortably use this solution from wherever they are, they can access information wherever they are, and all that. I talk about cloud-based or cloud computing. Cloud computing is very important also in underserved context, specifically because we are talking about underserved context. These are people who don't have access to funding, people who don't have access to resources, adequate resources. So governments are not able to support, healthcare system adequately. So what do we do? And we want to use technology to enhance health security. What we will do is we use
I'm so
technologies like
sorry, Dr.
cloud
Niatuka.
computing. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you. Uh, is it possible for you to wrap up in another few minutes?
Yes.
I can see the passion and I can see the interest, but we do have a fairly tight schedule. So
Okay.
if you could so kindly wrap up in another 5 minutes or so, I'd really appreciate it.
I'm already done, sir. Actually, this is the last. This is the last slide.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So basically, this is where my idea of ICT design is coming from. We don't just come up with solutions for the sake of it. We must use a design thinking approach so that we can come up with solutions that are context specific, human centered, that people are comfortable with, and that can meet people's needs, so that then we can be able to enhance health security. So as soon as people are able to access these services seamlessly, without challenges of cost, without challenges of rejection, or people not cooperating and all that, then we are going to have maximum effect or a maximum impact on health security in terms of how people make use this ICT oriented, ICT design oriented solutions, and we'll be able to achieve global health security. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Niatuka. And it was very interesting to hear about your, in particular for me, the collaborative design solution where you've incorporated the information, communication, and technology. And again, when I interrupted you, you could see and hear the passion in your voice as to how this interests you and the issues that you're trying to address. So thank you very much for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us. Next in our lineup, we have Dr. Wayne Goodrich. And Dr. Goodrich joined us from our sister campus at St. Augustine, where he, among other things, conducts some research in the field of cybersecurity. Wayne and I have had many exchanges. We of course, that's also a particular area of interest of my own, hence the number of conversations that we've had in the past. And so I'm also looking forward to hearing Wayne's perspective on global security challenges and some of the things that in particular have interested him over the years, what he thinks is to come. And so, ladies and gentlemen, again, without any further delay, I'd like to invite Dr. Goodrich to take the floor. Wayne?
Yes, good morning and welcome. And I'm happy to give this presentation this morning. Okay, so the title of my presentation is Moving Towards a Secure Digital Economy. I am a senior lecturer and head of the Department of Computer and Information Technology at St. Augustine's. Okay, so the goals of this presentation, primarily, I'm going to introduce a taxonomy that will classify technologies that allows us to enable digital transformation and support a digital economy. Secondly, I'm going to discuss some of the cyber threats and countermeasures associated with each layer of the taxonomy. And finally, I am going to discuss how developing countries should go about building a secure digital economy. So, first of all, let's start with some definitions. Let's see what is digital transformation. And of course, some people believe that digital transformation is doing business in a digital way. Examples of digital transformation may be e-commerce, buying things online, e-banking, and receiving payments. I certainly do that a lot. And of course, out of the pandemic, e-learning has become a very favorable way of doing business and offering courses online, etc. So digital transformation is basically doing business in a digital way. A digital economy, though, is quite different. And one must not get confused between a digital economy and digital transformation. In a digital economy, the main goal is to use data and then transform that data into new products and services. A good example of this is the Uber business model. In the Uber business model, you have a situation where data is collected on people who have taxi, who's offering the taxi services. You have maps and a geographic information on location data. And then you have information about people wanting a service. And then the whole concept of using machine learning and artificial intelligence to actually bring these services to end users is basically what the digital economy is about. And a company like Uber don't own a single taxi, but yet they're able to be $1 billion industry. So therefore, a digital economy is basically about the innovation of digital products, so that monies can be made in this way. Okay, so the taxonomy that I want to be talking about this morning, we are going to basically look at taking what happened since the early 80s in terms of technology, and we're going to be breaking it down into 4 layers. Layer 1 is basically connectivity and access infrastructures. And this layer is made up primarily of communication equipment such as routers and switches and cables, IoT devices, and computers. So a lot of our development in the early 80s through the 90s we were focused on stabilizing this access layer in terms of, making sure that we have connectivity and in the early days of computing. Um, then layer two, which is the software layer, infrastructure layer, is primarily dominated by mass marketed systems and utility software, things like operating systems, Oracle, databases. And one of the key um, features of layer two is that it's dominated by on-premises software. That is server, that is, a business would actually invest in servers and invest in software that they will actually store on premise. This dominated from the early 90s through to around 2010 or so. The second layer, and the third layer, which started roughly around 2010, um, out of the concept of virtualization came the cloud layer, whereby businesses now don't they not necessarily have to invest in all of this physical infrastructure. They can just once they have an internet connection, they can just go and purchase services like accounting services, um, and, and so many other services. And as a result of this the cost of startup to start up a business was significantly reduced. And then the fourth layer, of course, um, came out of the concept of, because cloud infrastructures allow us to separate processing from data. Um, it led to the maturity of data infrastructures and data storage networks that store big data. And out of big data led came concepts like machine learning and big data analytics. And out of big data analytics, we were able to offer innovative products. As I give an example, like Uber, Airbnb is another example of innovative products. Facebook, um, they use machine learning and data analytics to offer very attractive advertising. So all of these things led to the digital economy. So I would say that, so in this taxonomy, we are basically classifying layers 1, 2, and 3 as as a means of digital transformation, and layer 4 is basically about the digital economy. Okay, so let's start with some definitions again. Let's look at threats. A threat is basically a set of circumstances or events that that has led to the potential cause or damage of information or data. A vulnerability on the net side is a weakness in a computer system, um, and when this weakness is exploited, um, it can result in something really bad happening, which can be classified as a risk, which is basically the cause of a threat successfully exploiting a vulnerability. And what we do in computer science and computer security is that we spend a lot of our time trying to mitigate these risks by introducing countermeasures, strategies to basically fight of these threats and reduce the notion of our landscape in terms of our vulnerabilities. So that's what we do a lot. So basically, this diagram, this is going to be, just remember this diagram a bit, because we're going to be, you're going to hear me using terms like vulnerabilities, threats, countermeasures, and risks a lot. So let's start off by examining the threats that face access layer infrastructures. Primarily, we can talk about firmware and software upgrades to core networking equipment like routers and switches. Um, If this is not done on a timely basis, it can lead to certain vulnerabilities in these devices. One of the reasons why it's not done in a timely fashion is because to take down these devices to upgrade them is normally would mean that the network itself would be down. And if the network is down, it means that certain services will not be available. So, so this results in a vulnerability. Um, Misconfiguration of key network equipment, for example, like routers, can also lead to um, some type of vulnerability. IoT devices are very prevalent now in our networks, but IoT devices have a major problem in the sense that um, they're very in terms of having the ability to do a lot of processing. Um, they don't have that ability, and hence a lot of the security countermeasures or software that will be used to counteract threats. You can't really install them on these devices because of the low level of resources. Um, and often another major threat to access infrastructure is that when we buy the routers or switches, we don't normally clean them. We don't normally take up unwanted services. We normally just put them into production, and this is can cause major threats. So some of the countermeasures that a cyber security person can use to counteract the threats at layer one: network segregation and segmentation. Network segregation is basically where you separate the external network from the internal networks. For example, most firewalls will have something called a DMZ port, where where you can separate the internal network from the external network. Um, Networks segmentation is where you take a network and break it down into smaller pieces, and then you can protect each of those pieces. That's another route. Another technique that can be used is out-of-band management, whereby you communicate with the devices like routers and switches on a separate network, or using, I don't want to get too technical, but using some type of separation from the other devices. And of course, it is mandatory that organizations have security policies that dictate how people use systems. Of course, all these things go into helping. Um, Threats facing layer two, which is basically, as I said already, is on-premises software. Um, so improper configuration of software leads to vulnerabilities. So again, configuration is a major issue. Malware is basically software that was written to intentionally cause harm. For example, like viruses, worms, etc. These are very prevalent um, on-premises software. Notice that there's a nice little diagram on the side. This is a server farm. One of the things that is characteristic of on-premises software is that you have to invest heavily in server rooms and stuff like that. Um, of course, there's a whole array of attacks that can happen on-premises software, things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, directory traversal phishing. These are all interesting attacks that will take an entire lecture on their own. So I'm going to move on. Um, so in Trinidad, according to the Trinidad and Tobago Cybersecurity Incident Response Team, the three top threats facing TNT: ransomware, social engineering, phishing, and malicious insiders. These are the three top threats, just to let you know. So what are the countermeasures of threats facing layer two? Well, you could do things like put security policies in place, proper security policies. You can do things like, for malware, you can do things like backups. Backups are really, really important. And, backups are really interesting things. I've experienced a number of ransomware attacks, and sometimes the backup systems themselves are are, are attacked by the ransomware. So you have to be careful that backups should not be connected to the live system. And deceiving users, the best way to counteract for social engineering attacks is to educate. Education is extremely important. Hackers do a number of things like sending emails, and these emails, they normally give you a link to click on and stuff like that. So education, if you can educate your staff about the possible techniques that are used by hackers, this may be helpful as well. So the cloud, the layer 3 is made up primarily of it talks about cloud technologies, and cloud technologies basically resulted out of the whole effort of virtualization. Cloud technologies can present their form themselves in the form of virtualization of access layer, of access devices. So you can have virtual routers, virtual switches, or you can have virtualization of on-premises infrastructures, which is layer 2. You can have virtual hardware, virtual servers. Then you can have virtual applications. So rather than you having now to invest a lot of money in having these physical devices and software on site, you can now just pay as you go and go to a service provider or cloud provider, and that cloud provider will then make it possible. So once you have an internet connection, of course. So threats facing cloud infrastructures. One of the, of course, let me just add here that I just touched on one or two threats that in each of the layers. With each layer, you can have literally hundreds or thousands of different threats. So I just touched on one or two, just to make you aware of some of the threats and countermeasures, of course. Hack application software. Most cloud software is, all cloud software is made. I use the concept of application program interfaces, or APIs, and APIs allow software developers, to decouple the interface from the actual logic. And however, when this is done, it also means that any person around across the world can also look to see how these APIs are used, and APIs has become a common source of attack. And so all right, so that's what's happening there. So a lot of hackers study how APIs work, and then look for vulnerabilities and then attack. Insider attacks is another form of attack that can be done if you employ a cloud provider. A malicious insider that works at the cloud provider can have access to resources. You understand? And that in itself poses some type of threat. And of course, some of the countermeasures, there are standards to developing APIs that can be used. There's a standard called Open Cloud Computing Infrastructure. And once you use certain standards, and of course you have authentication services and stuff like that, that you can incorporate with your APIs, that will certainly be helpful. Insider attacks, of course, it's a bit more difficult to deal with. So this one may be addressed in the form of contracts, signing agreements with the cloud provider, and some type of litigation or something may take place if these things are violated. So not all issues can be dealt with technology, but of course there's a legal side to technology as well. Layer 4, data infrastructure. So common attacks on the data infrastructure, attacks on social media. So you can use something called a social media bot. But where a bot is the short for robot network, and it's a collection of internet connected devices that run malware in a coordinated fashion to attack an organization. This is a very common form of attacking. You may, these days with artificial intelligence, you don't know who you're speaking with. So you may be on social media and you may be getting messages from a bot and don't even know it. Content scraping, this is the practice of extracting content and information from a web page, right? So hackers working on behalf of a business can extract content and adjust the content in terms of price sensitive information, etc. That's another form of attack. And this is a big one that one of my research students is working on, fake news. So the intention or unintentional spreading of news that is biased or not real, not true, constitute fake news. Here are some examples of fake news. So here in Trinidad, we have one here where an image stating that that is a $30,000 fine if you are caught with tinted windows. The consequence of this incident is that inciting resentment against the government, and that was the goal. And this was issued in the Loop News on this date. Then there's another issue where Najee Minaj, she sent a tweet stating that the COVID vaccine can cause impotence, and this led to a lot of destabilizing in terms of confidence of the use of the vaccine. This was in the Guardian. Then you have WhatsApp voice notes that Port of Spain has been attacked, and the goal was to spread widespread panic across the country. And this was in the Loop News. But fake news don't only work with text, it also works with video. I remember during the pandemic that I saw a video with the Vice President of the United States, and the video basically said that unvaccinated people are more than 10 times likely to be hospitalized or die from COVID. And I believed it, to be honest with you, but I knew that something was wrong because it wasn't consistent with the narrative that was being pushed. So I went and I immediately went off and I did some research. And then, and I saw the real video. And trust me, I couldn't tell the difference between the real video and the fake video. So, and these are all done by using something called deep fake techniques, AI techniques. So, this poses a major threat to our internet. Okay. So, countermeasures for cyber threats facing layer 4. Well, web developers can prevent a bot attack by ensuring that the website is communicating with a human uh, by using something called captcha. And this is done like, for example, you may go on a website and it would ask you to like select where you see animals in this picture. Click on which boxes have animals in it, that type of thing, right? So that helps with to detect if it's a bot attack or not, because a robot typically there are certain concepts that a human being may be able to understand that a robot may not be able to understand. So and that is the goal there. And this is a big one, the use of two-factor authentication to access accounts. All of my banking institutions offer me a two-factor authentication. I will log in with my password, and then they will either send me a text uh, to use as the second factor, or I will get an email. But whatever the situation is, two-factor authentication has significantly helped to reduce bot attacks and other types of attacks. Okay, so building a secure digital economy, right? So building a secure digital economy really rely on developing those 4 layers that I spoke about just now. All 4 layers have to be relatively well developed in order to have a secure digital economy. So the digital economy includes research and development of digital product startups that use big data analytics to offer a new product, some type of new product. I was giving some examples earlier. And the goal is to add value to the economy via these products. So developing countries policies to enable a digital economy. So to enable a digital economy, developing countries need to provide an enabling policy framework for digital transactions. In terms of the Trinidad government introduced the Electronic Transactions Act, and also the data privacy and data protection laws. So Trinidad has started. The problem is that they have not proclaimed a lot of sections in the act. So things still need to be done there. Number 2, supporting environment for startups and other domestic digital businesses. So in order to have a digital economy, we need to have our education sector producing the skills that are needed to function in such an economy. So we need programmers, we need marketing experts, we need people in data analytics, artificial intelligence. And although I call in a lot of fields that seem to be in the technology area, all fields are important or play a role in this digital economy. Artists, for example, play a role. You can now with the whole concept of fungible assets, you can take part in this whole new realm of our digital art. So everybody has a role to play, and it's very difficult to say that you need these skills or don't need these skills. So it's more like a multidisciplinary approach that is needed in order to create a digital economy. Building public and digital infrastructures is a very important part. Government needs to developing countries need to build these data infrastructures so that startups can plug in to these data infrastructures and work. I'm going to show an example of this, and of course, the shaping of the digital framework um, that include controls. Okay, no. Okay, so developing countries protecting data flows across national borders. Um, so this is another interesting thing about a digital economy that we have to ask ourselves. Um, every build all of these data structures and have them housed in our country, um, do we allow the cross-border data to flow from Trinidad, for example, or Barbados to the United States, etc.? And so that's an interesting question that need to be asked. Do we protect it, and how do we protect it? Um, Data is accessible to regulators, of course. If we build a digital economy, we need to make the data of citizens accessible to regulators um, for different reasons, for security reasons, for regulatory reasons, um, matters related to national security. Um, Again, there must be some oversight there. Um, Building the domestic economy require the use of require startups and to use data from the data collected in order to build new services. So we're going to move on now. All right. Okay. So um, building a digital economy, that some of these services that are involved in building a digital data infrastructure is digital identity. Digital identity basically involves uses trusted data from um, uh, from a source of authority to initially verify the data and then authenticate any person that wish to use the data, right? Um, I am in this diagram here. We can see that that you have functional identities. So there are things, for example, like national ID, birth certificate, driver's permit. All of these things identify who you are. But to use um, a physical driver's permit on a day-to-day basis to identify who you are sometimes could is not useful in a digital environment. So what has to happen is that you have to find a way to have a unique digital ID for every citizen in such a way that when you present that ID, that ID would give you access to certain services via an authentication process. Now, one of the projects that we have done here in my department, the Department of Computing and Information Technology, is that we have worked for over 5 or 6 years on a biometric identity solution called BIS. And BIS basically provides a way to uniquely identify each citizen, and so therefore, once you are identified, then you can go on to use services. Now, this system was developed by Dr. Bernard and Margaret Bernard in our department, Laurice Phillips, and Dr. Q. And we are very happy to work with developing countries in order to roll out this indigenous thing and solution that we provide. So just bear that in mind. Yeah. So so building public digital infrastructures, you can do it in a number of ways. You can use massive government-owned data centers. I don't recommend this approach. Or you can have a number of alternatives whereby you can use a global public cloud. I don't know if that is useful, because if you're using a global public cloud, your data on your citizens will be all over the world because it's global. So I don't know if I like that one, but or you can use a commercial cloud provider in the region. This one is more at home. And the third solution, of course, is to use private-public partnerships in terms of providing local public clouds and services. This one is the one that I like best. So some of the key factors, of course, that need to be considered when you're building public services is the replication of processing and storage across multiple data centers in different locations. This will give some type of redundancy and resilience and allow for recovery services. Of course, a centralized security approach is needed when building data centers too, where cyber tools and cyber experts are employed to implement and monitor cybersecurity strategies. So, conclusion, in this presentation, we look at how we can move towards a digital economy via digital transformation. We have looked at the access layers. We have looked at some threats and countermeasures in each of these layers. And we are in a position now where we can have enhanced security. Once we have enhanced security in all layers, then we can guarantee a secure digital economy. This is the end of my presentation. It was a bit shorter than the others, but it's, yes. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Goodrich. You very clearly and succinctly demarcated the various logical layers and gave a very nice explanation about the considerations, the concerns that are related to security, and some of the ways that these could be addressed. And so we're very thankful for your presentation. Moving on, next in line we have Professor Lisa Dion Morris from the University of Leeds in the UK. Lisa was actually our moderator for part one of our symposium, and she's here this morning, well, again, as one of our colleagues. And in fact, if I may just take a minute to share that the idea for the symposium sort of was born out of a discussion between Lisa and myself when we were talking about our respective areas of interest. So cybersecurity and some of the threats that maybe quantum computing will pose in the not too distant future. And Lisa, with her research in health and other areas, and equity, diversity, and inclusion, for example, we realized that there are a number of areas that overlapped, and thought that, well, maybe there are a number of others who have perspectives of their own in consideration of that central theme of security. And so I'd like to welcome Lisa today. Professor Morris, in the capacity of a presenter, not moderator, which I think she prefers. And I'm very interested to hear on the topic of her choice this morning as we continue our discussion on global security perspectives. Professor Morris, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Curtis, for an interesting introduction. Yes, it was born out of a passion to look at different perspectives of what the universe, in terms of our experience on Earth, would look like, and our interaction would look like. So thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for helping to make this event possible. So moving on to my presentation. My name is Professor Lisa Dion Morris. My talk today is focused on two things. Firstly, it's the thing that I'm interested, the thing that I'm passionate about, and the thing that I'm good at. So the thing that I'm interested about is designing for older adults and people with disabilities. The thing that I believe I'm good at is looking for research opportunities. So my talk today is born out of an understanding of, firstly, what do I want for myself, and what do I want for society moving forward? Humans, are we experiencing techno stress? Are we digitally illiterate when considering our interaction with products, systems, and services? My background is design informatics, designing product systems and services, but specifically product descriptions and representations. Product system and service definitions, which focus on design configurations, from concept to output, and I would say even from output to transition into the market. Design informatics. It combines data science with design thinking. And I believe that Danny introduced the concept of design thinking this morning, whereby it considers, in the context of critical inquiry, this idea of speculation, what it might look like. But the premise is design through data, through the medium of improving product systems and services. And that's what I would like to talk about today. How we could improve product systems and services for older adults and people with disabilities based on understanding design and data science. The focus of my presentation today is on older adults, disabilities, and technologies. And how does that lead into the security perspective arena? It's really centered around the human, individuals, and the affected person, transnational, ideas of technology and technology use, as well as national health, and also well-being. My argument is clear. I argue that a global response to aging with technology is required by all disciplines. The reason being, firstly, a comprehensive understanding and assessment of older adults, and I'm specifically thinking about older adults and people with disabilities in global ethnic majority communities, their common issues, problems, and challenges using smart digital appliances in everyday use. It's important because we want to present and simulate scenario builders for the evaluation and deployment of specific emerging technologies within the context of use for global ethnic majority citizens. This is important because we need to verify and validate performance in relation to high service development, high service design, and solutions that fit not just a Eurocentric view of product systems and services, of what technology use is, but something that's more focused on what the majority people, humans, are using. And this is also important because of its application for the performance of emerging technologies, and what novel interventions might come out of designing for the global majority. And you ask me, okay, so why is this important in the Caribbean and Latin America? I would say it's important because most of the designs, in my opinion, from my perspective, are Eurocentric. It means that it's designed by non-global majority individuals for use by all individuals. In the Caribbean and in Latin America, I believe there is an urgent need to help reveal what the pressures are and relieve the pressures of an ever-aging population. For example, older adults are living independently for longer, all around the world. And this is specifically prevalent in Latin American and Caribbean populations, where there is both an increase in the aging population and an acknowledgement of the lived experience of people with disabilities. The number of older adults living independently in their homes are expected to increase. This might mean demands on public services, resulting from family fragmentations, geographical dispersion of individuals and family members across the globe. Therefore, people are having to live independently for longer. Now, the idea of what it might look like in the Caribbean and Latin America was actually presented 20 years ago, but yet it's not considered a priority. So living independently in the Caribbean and Latin America, I would say it is a priority research area for all disciplines. Population demographics and what that looks like for human security. So according to the World Health Organization, there are some stark figures that are going to hit us as a global community pretty quickly in terms of aging and health and disability. The population aged 60 and over will increase from 1 billion to 1.4 billion in 2020. This is increasing daily. By 2050, it's going to double. By 2050, it's going to double. This will continue to increase and increase. Aging populations to over 80s were expected to triple from 2020 to 2025, reaching 426 million. These are stark figures that are coming around the corner, and we need to respond because there is a human security issue with regards to serving the needs of older populations and people with disabilities, and also providing the services and the infrastructures that will allow society to function normally. With regards to disabilities, there's an estimated 1.3 billion people globally with a significant disability. Because there are increased acknowledgements of what disability experience is, the agenda for the disabled person, the person with a disability, will be moved to the top of the priority list. With increases in non-communicable diseases, people are living longer with medical interventions. So this means that there is going to be a real issue, problem, and challenge for researchers moving forward. Aging and disability is important. From a security perspective, it's about protecting, making resilient to prevent potential harm. There are a number of organisations who are focusing on age point research, issues of disability, how we depart in terms of gender, disability and sustainable goals, through to aging in the 21st century and what that might look like, its challenges, its opportunities. Everything through to global strategies and action plans for aging. It interests me for a number of reasons. Because with regards to aging, there are key priorities moving forward. Aging and disability for me, as I said before, is an interest and a passion, because the number of older adults have increased and will be increasing in most countries, most regions, and at a projected accelerated rate. So for me, at the beginning of this talk, I asked the research question: what is most likely to constrain global human and security responses to service research design and development of smart digital appliances, products and services for older adults. And hopefully at the end of this presentation, I'll be in a position to answer it in relation to my title. Am I stressed, techno-stressed when experiencing products, systems and services? Or am I just completely digital illiterate and it's my fault? So a definition with regards to techno-stress. It's about information overload because of the continuous interaction with a multiplicity of product systems and services and the characteristics of those things that cause interaction breakdowns and interaction focus shifts. So when the flow of activity breaks down because of an unfamiliar interface, or the interaction breaks down because the cognitive overload, the amount of cognitive effort needed to resolve a problem, complete an information processing task, or carry out lived experiences, everyday lived experiences, is impeded. This causes significant issues and problems, everything from high stress, mental anxiety, high rates in terms of blood pressure, and also high rates in terms of heartbeat. Or can I say, am I digitally illiterate? Focusing on the fact that it is really my fault because I cannot manage the interface. I cannot manage the expression of the user interface design. And there is a real problem with my ability, my cognitive ability to understand, integrate, communicate, evaluate, and create information security for me to actually use a product, systems, or service to carry out an everyday task. Digital literacy, on the other hand, will require me to have the skills in order to live, learn, and work in society where communication through information with digital products is a norm. So what does the current situation look like? In the literature, it states the following. In the impact of access to digital technology and digital exclusion with regards to older adults will be traumatic, specifically affecting finance and transport systems, social inclusion, which will also affect well-being. Furthermore, researchers in the literature argue that digital inclusion should be a priority to include design that responds to inclusive interfaces for all. There is a suggestion and a proposition of increased modeling, digital modeling of interfaces, modeling of interfaces, in order to understand the characteristics and the demands of such products and services on the individual, and what that might look like. So, what do my peers say? Yesterday and today, we have heard from a number of amazing researchers that have different disciplines, are from different disciplines, but like to interact in that one space. So I'm taking this opportunity now to actually find out what my peers say. Now, Danny and Retha talk about the need for a situational perspective. Now, this is something that I do as a researcher. I sit within the School of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Leeds, Design Research. I'm in the Institute of Design, Robotics and Optimization, but I take every single opportunity to co-collaborate and learn from people at the forefront of ideas from other disciplines, informatics, computing, because it's important to see what other people say is the situation and the problem from their discipline for me to understand and form a perspective of my own. So the situational perspective using service design strategy has been established by Retha and Danny, where they invoke the need for a more transformative situation to equip aging populations. Building on my other peers, our presentation from Azael yesterday really focused on this idea of the value proposition. And for me, that was interesting because it talked about purpose and purposefulness and business behavior in the value chain in the context of considering Industry 4.0, which is that emerging technology and what that space might look like for creating novel systems and services. Based on the talk by Anna yesterday, it was clear that there is a need for conceptualization, collaboration, and co-creation of experiences of interactions of a situational perspective and person-centered information, because there is a range of digital products at different levels, and this is expanding and growing, and we can't stop it. It also leans into other researchers who really focus on this idea of how do we as designers, how do we as scientists, how do we as experts and researchers play a part, ladies and gentlemen, in the multi-level process of modeling service ecosystems to advance the design for aging populations. I have thought for many years that with regards to design and designing for individuals, that the focus should be on looking at the representation of change agendas. The change agenda focusing specifically on what it might look like for a business moving forward. Business and industry need to be taken along. It can't just be the focus on the older adult or the person on with a disability. It has to be what I would say Danny called earlier stakeholder involvement, whereby we're creating consumer experiences that deliver transitional ideas of digital transformation. And this was presented by our last speaker, who really lent into this idea of industry functioning to release its global potential when it comes to the cybersecurity world. So when I start thinking about creating and developing and creating product systems and services for an older adult, this is what my mind looks like a person that's ready to move forward. Lots of ideas, lots of potential, lots of notes, lots of scribbles, lots of the wicked problem, the problem that exists but it's not well defined. And then I lean back into this idea of design informatics and what that would look like in the context and being able to establish the evidence base in order to put forward suggestions for the future. So what does the literature say with regards to British standards, older adults, and also presenting the landscape for improving product systems and services for people with disabilities? There are a range of tools and techniques as well as frameworks that are available. We have everything from the Inclusive Design Toolkit to the usability frameworks, to systems design scaling, to activity-centered research ecosystem approaches, and also design thinking journeys. And these are something that designers, engineers, as well as computer scientists, stakeholders who are in high-level product service delivery go to. Their first port of call. Firstly, to identify which tool is required, and then to describe the situation and what is needed, whether it's about understanding, whether it's about assessing the accessibility of the information, representing user requirements, or even going as far as to describe representations of products, services, and systems which respond to end user needs. Here's another example, ladies and gentlemen, of a potential toolkit or a myriad of to first go to tool opportunities, documents to support design development. Again, it's everything from British standards which focus on responding to aging populations, assessing and addressing service design, looking at standards for user interfaces, component parts, everything from ergonomics which regards best fit through to human factors, psychological, physiological, ergonomics, as well as anthropometric data to support the design and development of products that actually respond to exclusion and considers inclusion. So what does it look like in reality? Now, an earlier study that was done in the UK actually looked specifically at how people, older adults, with age-related cognitive decline, Any individual over the age of 55 will be experiencing age-related cognitive decline. That could include visual impairment, changes in the threshold of sound understanding. Those are examples of age-related cognitive decline, and also how it might look like in order to not remember the same, to not have the same spatial awareness, etc. So the study itself looked specifically at a number of individuals' interactions with everyday consumer appliances, which include a washing machine interface, in order to complete simple tasks. And I say simple. We expressed an understanding through the presentation of Analy that simplicity also may include complexity as well. So one of the things that the study actually presented, that when an older adult moved across a user interface, for example, a washing machine, in order to complete a simple everyday task, such as washing cotton bedding, that the interface was complex. Although simple, it was not easy to carry out the everyday task, a representation of the lived experience of washing clothes, with the interaction points, the controls, the interface, the labelings on interfaces. It posed problems, what can only be described as breakdowns, through to a non-linear interface, component parts being distributed, interface parts being distributed across the interface, no linkages and no organization between component parts, and component parts, when it comes to the interface, designed and responding to more styling expression than it does functionality. And this is where I say the problem is not just with the interface, but it's also with the associated information source material. So with all things, when it comes to completing tasks with lived experience of product, service, and systems, there is information. There is what it looks like in the real world, habitual behavior. So I know when I'm washing items of clothing that I would like to wash white cotton bedding. And when I go to the interface, it's not always easy to understand the context of washing white cotton bedding with the layout, with the design of the interface. And it can cause what I consider to be technical stress. So from the perspective of techno stress, insights tell us, and the theory expresses the concern that older adults experience techno stress because of the information and communication technology used on everyday technical smart appliances. And this is exacerbated by age-related cognitive decline. And there is a consequence. The negative consequences are clear. Interruptions and disruptions to workflow, and most importantly, people stop using these appliances and they're rendered redundant, unusable. From the point of design informatics, there is a solution. Maybe it's best if we stop saying that, there is a problem with the individual using them, it's age-related decline, it's disability. We look more closely at the human interaction with the product, service, and system. This is an opening for what I consider to be human security, ensuring that people are able to live independently in their homes for longer, allowing them to be independent, allowing them to actually live with dignity, and allowing them to complete everyday lived experience tasks without being dependent on others. So design informatics in this context combines data science with design thinking, everything from empathy through to testing and prototyping. But I would always say that the design thinking model currently misses out the first thing, which is the storytelling. The premise is that design informatics needs data in order to inform design. So I look again at that model. When I looked at human, I looked at the next level down, which was about technology. Then I looked about culture, and I would break that up into another layer. Older adults, information acquisition behavior, how they actually experience and behave around user appliances, and understand that the most important thing about technology is the product, the system, and the service design that actually encompasses when things go wrong. Within the context of human technology and health, I lean into this visualization, whereby as responders to health security issues around aging and technology, we don't need to just focus on the deficiency of the human, the end user, but we actually need to think about information processing and the controls and the control system of the appliance, because there is a continuous interaction, whether it's by input and output, whether it's by displays or controls, whether it is by responses to feedback, whether it's discrete or qualitative, whatever that may be, there's activities, actions, operations going on. And it's a complex understanding of what technology might look like when you're aging, when you have a disability. That's really hard to simulate when you have full capacity. So when I say storytelling before empathy, it's important to hear the stories, the voices of the individuals, firstly, before we actually express an understanding. So I'm going to present to you an example of the storytelling, but the storytelling to evidence a response to the question. So using the information processing model presented and using an interaction with a simple microwave oven. So a number of older adults, and these again, I'm going to stress that these were done in the UK. These activities and research activities were done in the UK. And it would be really interesting from my perspective to carry out the study in the Caribbean and Latin America to see what would happen, whether the information processing activities, whether the breakdowns, whether the context of use, the use of language on the interface makes a difference, makes a real difference based on where you are, where your experience and what your context is. So, I enjoy producing coding schemes, and this is an example of the interaction and the coding of that interaction between the user, the older adult, and the interface, and I will include information source material. So in a microwave oven, sometimes, more than often, you have a ready meal. So you have some instructions on how to actually heat the meal. Validation instructions, which will help you heat the meal or cook the meal to the right temperature. This is really important because most of the time when individuals, human beings, are actually interacting with products, systems and services, they're not doing it in isolation. They're actually using information source material, memory, habitual behavior, lived experience to carry out the task. They just don't walk up to an appliance, start using it and hope for the best. They have a memory, a cognitive processing map of what they experienced before and how they interpret and what meaning comes out of that interaction. So this is a visualization of what this might look like. The evidence, the data science to support the research response and the research answer to the research question. So from this visualization, it presents an understanding of information gathering, searching on the interface. It also focuses on interactions, information processing, information breakdowns and activities. It also focuses on the fact that this individual, older adult, carries out a number of activities simultaneously at the same time. That means there is an example potentially that it is not the fact that they're illiterate, digitally illiterate. On the contrary, they are using cognitive skills at different levels and different transition, overlapping cognitive and interaction skills as they proceed through the task. These overlapping transitions among cognitive skills includes visual discrimination, looking for different appliances, looking for different objects and visual objects. It also includes the concept of looking for events, referring back to memory. There's a lots of cognitive verbalizations, which means problem solving aloud in order to recall intentions and also in order to resolve interaction problems with the interface. Moving on from this, I would say the next stage in terms of what that might look like is really focusing on the next stage of the coding scheme, which is really looking specifically at a more complex understanding of multi-activities and multi- interactions on an interaction level, on a cognitive level of what's going on as somebody, as an individual, an older adult, attempts to do something as simple as heat a ready meal. Everything from identifying instructions through to confirming and obtaining instructions, looking at the interface, moving across from the interface to the packaging, searching for items, cognitive verbalization. There is no doubt in my mind, ladies and gentlemen, the current problem with the interaction with everyday product, services, and systems relates to the high level of cognitive overload needed to navigate an already complex or simple user interface. This is specifically interesting for a number of reasons, because it helps me then go back to my definitions and really concentrate on a sound answer to the question: is it about techno stress, or is it the fact that I'm digitally literate? And I would say with confidence, based on the data science presented by the coding schemes, that information overload and continuous interaction with digital devices, appliance products and services causes a state of stress because of the overlapping transitions between multiple tasks, thinking, talking, visually looking for things. And the characteristics of those actually are exacerbated by the user interface. With regards to smart appliances and the microwave oven, I would say that this is an example through all types of digital interactions today, that this is techno stress for older adults. Nimron focuses specifically on this idea of, okay, if we're targeting an improved strategy, then this improved strategy should really focus, as Danny said before, on the needs and capabilities of the individual, but really responding to the fact, you know what, we're already under a lot of stress. So it will take a design thinking response combining data science and stakeholders. So all those techniques about co-creation, co-understanding, co-development, co-dissemination, to look at the problem from lots of perspectives: the user, the manufacturer, the marketeer, the distributor. All these people need to be involved, because the premise is now that the future for human security will be a better understanding of design informatics and how data can be used in order to become a medium for improving older adults' experiences through a better understanding of information acquisition behavior for the purpose of improving, little by little, ladies and gentlemen, improving, making better. Nothing is guaranteed, but improving products, systems, and services through design. And that has its repercussions on a number of levels. Repercussions because it feels like, for the first time, we can now start thinking about involving the bigger team. The bigger team presented yesterday. So I will then lean into my interaction with Professor Azaya, because I know that he's really focused on purpose, and I know that I've identified key characteristics through my research about purpose. I've also was quite actually taken by Professor Taylor's presentation yesterday, where he talked about the UI. And from my understanding of UI, it's about user interface and the way that people interface with everyday product, systems, and services. That interaction for the purpose, improved interaction for the purpose of efficiency, safety, improving usability. And I actually take warmth from his presentation, because you know what? There is an understanding of the need on an environmental level that needs to be transitioned into product design and product development that really does focus on this idea of the UL, okay? The UL, untouchable, we talked about unpredictable, all these things, that utopia, that we really need to think about that, the worst case scenario, and responding to that worst case scenario on a macro and a micro level. I also take heart from the presentation given by Professor Jourdain, where she talked about, okay, let's think about it. How can we use technology in order to respond to sensors? How can we use technology for learning? And this is a great opportunity for multidisciplinary activity and me to lean into my relationship with her and actually work collaboratively to draw on her skills, because I can identify the problems, but I will need experts such as her in order to help me with the research opportunities. Dr. Mansingh, she talked about AI. And I can see the overwhelming potential for AI in this context, because there is an opportunity for AI when it comes to logically organizing the information component parts, augmentative reality, the distribution of the interface to other surfaces, looking at the use of AI for the purpose of learning and learnability. And there is an opportunity now to actually start to think about co-creation, co-collaboration, and the purpose of focusing on design that is more conducive to the way in which we work together as researchers. This is a focus for the simple fact that as a designer, as a researcher, as somebody that focuses on design development, I will need more than just my team. I will need other researchers to work with me and co-collaborate with me, and I'm going to reach out to all of these individuals as we speak right now. For the purpose of what we do next, it's clear that from a design development perspective, I'm working on that next stage which is looking specifically at emerging technologies. So in a recent book chapter with myself and Professor Annalise Jordan, we really focus on scenarios for emerging technologies. Cross-disciplinary thinking about performance and evaluation criteria as a response to aging populations that are actually working with technology. We're using the criteria in order to standardize, find appropriate, think about learnability, sequential grouping, and functional grouping of component parts for smart digital appliances. The next stage of that will be working with the larger community. Working with the larger community to think about what that might look like with regards to online services, cost and finances. That network of manufacturers, those individuals that I can work with and lean into to establish the resources. Now, I know that last speaker talked about resources and it being a threat, but I say this, not having the resources to respond to the everyday needs of the older population and people with disabilities will also become a major security threat moving forward. The next stage is going to be a little bit more refined, whereby we work together as a team in order to understand what it looks like from software developers, system engineers, all the way through to marketeers, cybersecurity, people in the arena of climate, because you know what? If something doesn't work and it can't be used, it goes into landfill and it becomes an environmental problem. So all these aspects have an impact. So I say, if we start with an aging population, we start with responding to the needs of people with disabilities, that we can allow them to live independently for longer, we will have an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to think about all types of global security perspectives and our responses to those. So I'm going to encourage you to think more clearly about the experiences that older adults, people with disabilities, people with cognitive impairment, mild or severe, have with regards to their interaction with appliances, systems and services. It is sometimes the fact that some appliances, some user interfaces are unfamiliar, but most of the time it's about sequential grouping, functional grouping, and something wrong with the interface itself that causes a major problem. With this in mind, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, okay, from a design informatics perspective, it can be used clearly to give an understanding. My disciplines can be used to give an understanding, ladies and gentlemen. But the key to it is that we need to be able to work together in order to come up with a comprehensive assessment of older adults from a global ethnic minority common perspective of the problems and issues and challenges experienced by individuals with smart user appliances. I've established that by using design informatics, we could have a presentation or a simulation of experiences that can be used to build scenarios for evaluating the deployment of emerging technologies. I've also shown that there is a potential for a method to verify and validate performance criteria. And this is specifically required when considering high-level service design, product, service, solution development. That includes all disciplines. And this is really important because if we are considering novel interventions, it can't be a styling exercise. It has to be a clear response to the needs and requirements of all end users and all stakeholders. So, what is most likely to constrain global human security responses to service design and development for smart appliances for older adults? I would say yes, it is the following. A lack of understanding of aging with technology on a global security perspective challenge scale. It is indeed the lack of understanding of the interconnectivity between simplicity and complexity and the aging landscape. And I would say that most of the time that researchers don't work together. I'm talking about transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary research combining to give a collaborative response. There is limited dialogue in the literature from practitioners, policymakers, and stakeholders. So that's probably where Danny's stakeholder mapping exercise is required in order to identify best practice and best solutions about the threats of aging with technology in the Caribbean and Latin America. There is limited oversight, but there needs to be more oversight on different discipline perspectives with regards to policy of science, the understanding of international relations when it comes to what happens about people living in diaspora in different countries, and because we are a melting pot of experiences, a melting pot of cultures in different locations. There may well be an opportunity for economists, sociologists, and psychologists to work together in this area to look specifically at this challenge. There is also opportunities, because I live for opportunities specifically in research, for joint projects to initiate a collaborative understanding of how this will probably affect global security and what those probabilities will look like in terms of the unpredictable will be predictable in the future, and promote not just peace and stability for all, but inclusion for everyone. So I would say currently there is an absence of education and training on the future generations, on global security, and the perspective of what aging with technology would look like specifically in the global south. And I'm saying this because I say this with my heart. Responding to the needs of the global majority is an essential part of responding to health security, human security, and global security perspectives of the future. So, in answer to my question, humans, are we experiencing techno stress, or am I personally digitally illiterate? I'm going to say that it's techno stress, which is making me insecure with technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Morris. Uh, that was very informative. I myself have a number of questions that I'd like to ask, but we'll see maybe towards the end of this morning's session. I would now like to invite Dr. Curtis Charles from our sister campus in Antigua, who I know is very passionate about the area of education. And I'm also particularly interested to hear about some of the challenges and the concerns that security poses in the area of education. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Charles and invite him to make his presentation this morning. Dr. Charles.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for the invitation. It's an honor to be here representing the Fifth UE campus, which as of today is just 4 years old. It's interesting that we even speak in this conference because we were born into a critical time. We were born in 2019, so you could consider us a COVID baby. And we were born 2 years after the fourth industrial revolution of 2019 began. So a lot of my presentation you would see encapsulate both of those. My charge this afternoon is simple. Just in asking the question, is it possible that if we educate our masses, that global security will go down? So if I'm looking at, if I'm sketching out a causal relationship here, I would say that as education capacity increases throughout the world, then global security will go down. As education capacity reduces, global security threats increases. And that's the thesis of my presentation. I'm an architect by training, an architect, higher education administrator, and data scientist. So I think about the world a little bit differently, and this is obviously where my thrust of the presentation is. In a party in architecture is what we consider what's the concept, what's the idea that holds a design of a building together or a presentation. And for me here, my apologies. And for me, it's really about providing access to quality education and basically looking at the barriers. What are the barriers? If we remove all the barriers from education, could we have an atmosphere where we would definitely only have the ability for peace and not war? So this is a statement by UNESCO that basically says by providing access to quality education is essential in creating a peaceful and purposeful world. So when I think about that as an educator, I say as educators, we are peacemakers because that's what we do as educators. So I wanted to take a little bit of your time to look at what are some of the barriers preventing access to education. And this is K through grade. But I wanted to look at it. I wanted to look at the myriad of ideas that prevents access to education. But I wanted to look at some that we could control. So, like in our sphere of control versus our sphere of influence. Teacher shortage and quality probably is number one. We know that in education, one of the major success for a student is what is happening inside the classroom and what is happening outside the classroom. And some statistics say as much as 80%, the quality of the teacher in front of the classroom is the highest predictor of a student's success. And in today's age, we even have in the Caribbean and many parts of the diaspora where we have in front of our classrooms people that are not qualified. It is not efficient, and it's not sufficient for us to just have a warm body in front of our classroom. It says that we don't care about the future of our nation and we don't care about the future of our societies. So to be able to have a qualified faculty or qualified teacher in a classroom is essential, and that's one of the major reasons the shortage of qualified teachers. We'll talk about shortage of teachers in a little bit. Infrastructure resources is also a barrier towards accessing education. I wanted to look at the second paragraph there, and if you could join me in thinking about this from an entrepreneurial perspective, right? I see there, according to UNESCO, around 69 million new teachers are needed to achieve the universal primary and secondary education by 2030. Colleagues, that's 7 years from now. If I put on my entrepreneurship hat and I start thinking about this, I had to first look at what are the countries in the world, what are the major countries in the world where teachers are shortage. And if we look at globally, we're talking about sub-Saharan Africa, we're talking about India, we're talking about the United States, Brazil, Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Philippines, South America, China, Mexico. And some of these countries, we may not think about the list, but the reality is that if we know that these are the majority countries that have these shortages that make up the maximum of the 69 million teachers, what is our goal as educators? I would think that every department of an education, our School of Humanities and Education in the University of the West Indies will be rethinking how we export teachers to these countries. Is teachers something that we could export, or how do we build collaboration with these governments so that we could help educate the population so that they can have a wider capacity building in their region. The reality of this discussion is that regardless of what security mechanisms we talk about today, it will continue to escalate if we don't have educated population. If we have an educated masses, we will have more people to fence against cyber attacks. If we have more data, more people educated, we will have more opportunities to look at large data sets and look at algorithms that look for these patterns and trends to say where hurricanes are going to go, what the economy is going to do to make critical decisions. If we have more women in computer sciences and in STEM, we will have the ability to make better decisions in technology and technologically in tech and corporate tech. So it is really important that we pay attention to that 69 million, because I have to tell you, as the Director of Academic Affairs at Five Island Campus, I am looking at this and I'm saying we got to do some, we got to kick up our game in terms of helping bridge that gap. We can't do 69 million alone, but this is what this conference is all about, to be able to collaborate and say, look, let's raise consciousness of things that are affecting our people. And how could we do something about it collaboratively? When we look at conflicts and instability, we need to look no more than what happened in Iraq. Listen, before the 1991 Iraq War, Iraq was one of the most progressive higher education or education places in the world. In a place in the Middle East where women are sometimes prohibited from going to school, there were women professors, women scholars in Iraq. Iraq was tremendously progressive, but with the war, disrupted all of that, demolished it, and it's a rubble compared to where it was in 1991. If we look no further than what's happening in Ukraine, education is destabilized. So as that education destabilizes, look, you can almost visualize this causal relationship. As education destabilizes, conflicts increases, right? Until we solve that problem with Ukraine, conflicts are going to increase and security is going to be a challenge beyond Ukraine because we're all connected. But as we begin to find solutions, education will be able to increase. We'll have much more masses and include. So if we have much more people educated, we'll have less conflicts because people will be more professionalized, thinking about the future of their countries and thinking about the future of their families. Migration and displacement. In the United States, with Katrina flood, hurricane, five hurricane. I mean, when we looked at Katrina, we looked at the amount of African Americans that were displaced because of Katrina. It is mind blowing that the area where they once lived has now been gentrified, and they have been displaced based on where they came from, where the heritage from, where the children were going to school, the divide in which those children were beginning to understand the culture and being educated, all that was disrupted. And these people have been displaced in Atlanta. That means that the children have to restart education. The more we could be consistent in building capacity in our people, the less we will have these global frictions. If we then look at teacher motivation, which is another barrier, teacher motivation is huge because even if we have skilled teachers in front of the classroom, we have skilled teachers who are lowly paid, they have limited professional development, and they have challenges working conditions. I'm sitting in Antigua right now in Barbuda, and right now there's a sit-in with the teachers because the teachers are protesting that they haven't, actually school was supposed to start last week, and the sit-in was threatened last week, so the ministry moved it to start on Monday. The teachers continue to sit in on Monday. The young faces that you see in front of you is who suffers there, right? So the conditions, what the teachers are really protesting for, one of the major areas is the conditions, the lack of security in the schools, the fact that they have some conditions that are not amenable, as they said, to teaching. These are huge barriers that will dampen the motivation of teachers and hence, again, give you these levels of inequalities and accessibility. When I was driving here this morning, I was telling my wife, I said, but this school is open. She said, well, goodness, this is a Catholic private school. So the inequalities of the private Catholic school, even though you're paying for it, those kids' schools are not interrupted, whereas the public schools are interrupted. So to be able to have access to that education and to be able to have equality, all those things are interrupted, especially in the remote area. And I have to tell you, when I was preparing for this, my wife is a education professor. I'm higher ed as well, so we live higher ed and technology. And when we were thinking about this, I was saying that maybe we need to develop a BSc in rural teacher education. Because if you look at the countries on that list, Sub-Saharan, India, Brazil, Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Philippines, South America, Mexico, most of these inequalities and accessibility challenges are in the remote areas. So how do we begin to teach a new pedagogy where teachers could be trained to have empathy for these rural areas and empathy for the people who live there, and a sense of servant leadership in terms of getting access to these areas? So inequality and accessibility is also another barrier. Then when we look at inadequate curriculum, this is, I'll talk about the fourth industrial revolution a little bit, but this is the crux of where we are as a people. When we look at all these countries we're talking about, and we look at the southern areas, right? Our curriculums are outdated, right? Outdated, irrelevant, biased curriculum, as well as ineffective assessment methods. Ineffective assessment methods is that, for example, if this young guy named is Jim, does Jim know what Jim needs to be, what Jim needs to know when Jim finishes this course? What type of assessment? Is it authentic assessment? Is it using tractic intelligence? Are we looking at Jim who might be good at building things so that we would just test Jim based on his ability in building? So creative. Tractic intelligence also talk about analytical. Another student might be good at analytical, another one might be good at practical. So what type of assessments are we using in the 21st century to prepare our students for the future of work and the fourth industrial revolution? Updating our curriculum, and again, I see this as an opportunity for our schools of education that we now know where those countries are. We now know that there's 69 million we need to have built by 2030. How are we going to do that? How could we reach into these rural countries and basically help them upgrade their assessment, upgrade the curriculum, so that we all could rise to the top and reduce the amount of insecurity? Socioeconomic barriers, another areas that prevents our people from getting quality education. Discrimination based on gender. I just talked about the issue with computer science. Listen, for the last 25 years or so, it has been less than 25% of female students have graduated from computer science. Isn't that a problem for somebody? I think it's a problem for us. So when we started the School of Science, Computing and Artificial Intelligence here on campus, the one thing we realize is that our female students will need to have some type of support, because we know that coming into the program, there are going to be more guys than female. It's the only school of the 4 schools on campus where there are more gentlemen than young ladies. So what we did, we reached out to colleagues across the diaspora who are female in high positions in tech, and we formed a Women in Tech Club. What the Women in Tech Club is that they are assigned to one of the female students who could mentor these female students, who could have somebody that they could talk to, because we need to know that they could help us raise those numbers. So what we're trying to do is to cut the discrimination that against women and female moving into STEM and computer science and information technology and data science. We think that we could reverse that, and we think that we have begun to do that. Then early childhood. I'm really passionate about early childhood. Last year, the Minister of Education called Principal Williams and myself to have a discussion on how we reimagine education to improve in Antigua and Barbuda. And the first thing we did, we ended up having like a 3-hour discussion one evening. The first thing we went to was early childhood. The reality is that if you think about what we do with early childhood right now, we have our most vulnerable students being taught by the least qualified people. You have Auntie Nenen down the road, so Auntie Nenen has some time. She have a group of children. Auntie Nenen is going to come and take the group of children, and she's going to see them until you come back from work. Auntie Nenen have no degree. Auntie Nenen have no physical training. So what we did that evening is we say, okay, look, Minister, we don't have plans to have an early childhood, but we want to work with the government. So we will partner with, on Open Campus. We partner with Open Campus School Early Childhood Program is online. And within 10 days or so, working with the principal at Open Campus, we got the permission to offer the face-to-face early childhood here. The minister afforded 25 full scholarships for 25 people of those who wish to come into early childhood, but predominantly those teaching in early childhood without the training. It is important that if we build a society and we build in capacity, like any structure you build, you must have a solid foundation. And I challenge everybody at the sound of my voice, we got to get a grip on early childhood. We just can't expect to excel in CSEC and CAPE beyond 24% of students in math if we don't have a good foundation in early childhood and K through 12. Another barrier is the technology divide. Specifically wanted to look at this because, I mentioned that in 2017 was the advent of the fourth industrial revolution. And as the whole world moves with the fourth industrial revolution, all these inhibitors that I talked about just now, all these inhibitors are not reaching our people because of the barriers. So one world is moving with the fourth industrial revolution, and another world who is less fortunate have all these barriers are basically moving down. So how do we come together so that we could move people who looks like us and folks who have a passion for teaching, a passion for education, and a passion for reducing crime, to say, yes, we know where the fourth industrial revolution is going, and yes, the Philippines, or yes, South Africa, or yes, Sub-Saharan Africa, we know that you need us, and we're going to be there to help you develop these new curriculums so that we could all rise to the top. So those are areas that we must have, that's important. Out of school youth, UNESCO estimated that during the COVID, there was 1.6 students out of school. That's mind-blowing. That 1.6 million students were out of school during COVID, doing some level of education, but not the same as they were accustomed to because the momentum are broken. It's estimated that that number also has increased for some students who refuse to go back, or adolescents who refuse to go back to school. Because, one of the things we have to look at is, particularly in low-income communities, and again, I go back to the rural areas, students are not enrolled in formal training. One of the things that we have recognized at Five Island campus, the first year we were here, is we started what is called the Lifelong Learning Unit, LLU. That's run by Ms. Paula Lee, who's doing a remarkable job. And what Paula Lee concept was that, look, not everybody's going to want to do formal education. So those young people who have dropped out of school, or those young people who may be in a low-level position that want to up their skill in project management or life cycle costing or supply chain management or data science, they could come here and do a 13 weeks or 8 weeks course, up their skills. At some point in time, the university is going to look at that, working through the board for undergraduate studies, and say, could we offer some level of credits for some of these? The other thing that we are doing is that we are doing for many people who say somebody might be in accounting in this field and have no sense of formal education, but has been an accountant for 15 years. How could we offer lifelong learning for credits? So those are some innovative ways that we as a 4-year-old institution is moving to try and change the equation with some of these inequalities in our society. And inclusive education, ensuring that all learners, included those with disabilities. I heard my sister talk before me about disabilities. My wife is a disability special ed professor. One of the degrees that we started last year, we got approved last year, that starting this year, is teaching students with exceptional needs. And I have to tell you, this is not a degree that's anywhere in UE, but again, as a 4-year institution, when we look at the landscape of where we are, we cannot leave disability people behind. We have to bring them with us. In the United States, there's a quota of every United States government agency must have a percentage of disability people, and they must make the accommodation. What we are trying to do is to bring the region, the entire OECS region, the Eastern Caribbean, by offering this program. Part of it going to be blended, part of it going to be face-to-face, but all our Eastern Caribbean, and I dare to say Caribbean nations, need to be enrolled in this program called the MIT in teaching children with exceptional needs, because it's an outrage right now that we have to deal with those and we don't have the resources. So we are here to help them, again, as a four-year institution, looking at how we change this equation. But the good thing about it is that we know the benefits of doing those things we just talked about. We know the benefits. We know that education as a foundation is a foundation for social and economic development. We know that access to quality education fosters social and economic development. We know a well-educated population is more likely to have higher levels of employment and income and overall well-being, reducing risk of social unrest and conflict. In the Eastern Caribbean and the OECS region, when we arrived here in 2019, and I think it still is, it's moving a little bit, only 2 in 10 citizens go on to tertiary education. No institution, no region could be competitive with 2 in 10. No region. Our goal is to move that to 6 in 10 in 7 years. 6 in 10. So it's a noble goal, but part of doing that is opening access. So the strategic priorities of the University of West Indies: access, agility, and alignment with industry. We are looking at all of them, but we have really taken a lead on access, because we want to open that aperture. The only way we can open that aperture is to have blended learning at some level of online, so we could reach the other parts of the Eastern Caribbean. But we have to move from 2 in 10 to 6 in 10 at least, because it's the only way we would have that education as a foundation for social and economic development. And we know that the benefit of that is that we would reduce the risk of social unrest and conflict. The next thing we know is that the fourth industrial revolution, some of the drivers of this fourth industrial revolution for social economic development, is to democratize. Before I came here at Five Island campus, I was at Microsoft, as data scientist in the education group. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella is famous for saying we have to democratize technology so that everyone, everywhere in the world have the ability to build on capacity, and we broaden the access to technology. This is an example where we democratizing through online and distant learning for marginalized communities to enable the delivery of high quality education, regardless of geographic barriers. We have to stress on that, regardless of geographic barriers. Now we would say that it may not be possible. There's always the art of the possible. We had to make it possible. Because if we don't leave those marginal societies, these kids are going to grow up illiterate of technology, and they would be out of the fourth industrial revolution or any technology innovations that come after this. The fourth industrial revolution drivers for social and economic development. This is one that's dear and near to my heart. Digital skills, integrate literacy, digital literacy, technical skills into the curriculum and education system to better prepare students for rapidly evolving jobs. Listen, when I came here, we had 3 schools. We had a School of Business and Management, we had a School of Health and Behavioral Sciences, and we had a School of Humanities and Education. With the encouragement of Principal Williams, we stood up the school and designed the School of Science, Computing, and Artificial Intelligence, because what we wanted to do is to make sure that every student graduating from the University of West Indies Five Island campus has digital literacy and technical literacy based on the curriculum. So the idea here of the School of Science, Computing, and Artificial Intelligence is to be catalytic. It's not just to be a school where students will come and study artificial intelligence, computer science, and information technology. It's to be catalytic. So if you're a student in the School of Business and Management, you could come to the School of Science, Computing, and Artificial Intelligence and understand business intelligence and understand business analytics so that you could make better decisions. If you're in the School of Humanities and Education, you could come here and study data so you could do sentiment analysis of each one of your students so you could then develop precision education, a plan for each specific student. And if you're in the School of Humanities and Behavioral Sciences, well, everything we have heard from COVID is health informatics. So the idea is that how this new school could be a catalyst, could be a catalyst for making sure that every student, which is what you see at the bottom here, every student would graduate, with these digital skills. Empowering social excuse me, empowerment and social cohesion. We know that empowering social cohesion means that we want to bring different ethnic groups into being. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about Antigua and Barbuda. I don't think I've ever been to any Caribbean country or anywhere I've traveled to that has a melting pot of people like from everywhere. But what that does is that it brings in tolerance, right? It basically, this education promotes social cohesion, encourages tolerance, understanding, respect, reduces tension among different ethnic groups and religion. So this is what education is. This is what the university is all about, bringing different disciplines. So this is why Professor Williams and myself are traveling to London next May to attend the scholarship, Global Scholarship Forum, talking to scholarship agencies from all over the world so that we could recruit international students to our campus. We are really bullish on this. We believe that all our campuses should be diversified, but especially this campus, we want to make sure that we at least lean forward out there and recruit campuses so that we could have this, because we understand that the more our students understand different disciplines and different socio-economic groups and different cultures, the less conflicts we're going to have globally. The fourth industrial revolution also is a driver for empowerment and social cohesion. This is using collaborative learning platforms, virtual augmented reality, global education networks. This is an opportunity of using virtual reality here for your students to understand cultures without being there. This is Machu Picchu in Peru, where students could at least go there, see the facility, understand the culture without leaving the classroom, but being able to use that in terms of augmented reality and virtual reality. So the fourth industrial revolution allows us to have that capacity. What we need to be able to do is to transfer that to the regions that we talked about earlier that doesn't have those skills and capabilities. So we know the power of education in this. We know that with virtual reality and augmented reality that we could learn about other cultures. We could immerse ourselves in other cultures, and we could reduce the conflicts and not understanding. When I say conflicts and prevention of peacemakers, one of the things that education could provide is a sense of stability, hope in young people, and in conflicts affected areas, reducing risk. And I wanted to specifically use the candle here because this is, unfortunately, this is what we see whenever there's major conflict or whether there's a death in the community. You see the whole community come out. My hope is that as we look at conflicts abroad and as we look at the mission of education to reduce conflicts, that we will see less of these candles and more basically joy in terms of building capacity. My philosophy is that we haven't begun in the world to touch the capacity of our people. If we could only touch the capacity of our people and educate them, I am telling you that we will have less global risk. And of course, we can't talk about global risk without talking about the Sustainability Development Goals. And as we look at the Sustainability Development Goals, primarily Goal 4, Goal 10, Goal 5 are basic ones that we're looking at in terms of quality of education. The fourth industrial revolution also produces drivers for, as the G's that I mentioned, global security, enhancing gender through EdTech, global citizenship through virtual exchanges, improve access to education for vulnerable groups using digital tools. Talked about that a little bit. And then, as I end with this, I just wanted to end with this first slide that I show. Education cannot wait. When I think about the University of the West Indies, who has been in business educating the Caribbean region for the last 75 years, and I think about this presentation, I had to conclude that we are pacemakers. The University of the West Indies for the last 75 years, because of the amount of people that have been educated throughout the Caribbean, the leaders that we have produced, the Nobel Prize winners, these people have been instrumental, and the professors have been instrumental in avoiding conflicts throughout the Caribbean because we produce a more educated population. So I want to challenge all my colleagues who are professors and educators that join the Peace Force. Embrace it. Embrace the fact that what we do in front of a classroom, regardless of the difficulty, regardless of how tough this year was. I mean, I got up this morning praying and thanking the Lord for going through another academic year, that the faculty and our students and staff and administrators, we made it through a year. But what we did within that year that we have to embrace is that we were basically preparing peacemakers, right? Because the more educated those students are, the less they will get in trouble over the summer, the less they will get in trouble over the break. They will be able to get engaged in a summer camp to learn more about coding, to learn more about all these aspects that we taught them this year. So when I see this, I see providing access to quality education has created a more peaceful and prosperous Caribbean because of the peacemaking work that the university has done. Yes, we have educated, but in the process of educating, we reduce conflicts. We give people the opportunity to do what I consider the art of the possible. Think about it. This is what our challenge is. And as I close, I just wanted to leave this image. This is an image where we're partners with Microsoft as well, and working with Microsoft in 2018, around that time. The fourth industrial revolution was really keen in our head when we were talking to higher education institutions. And this is a statement when we consult with higher education institutions that we stress to them. As the fourth industrial revolution unfolds, every single education institution will be charged to educating every learner at scale. How your scale is defined in Europe, in Africa, or in the Caribbean, you have to discern that. But we know that we cannot break this camel back of educating and building capacity among our people unless we educate at scale. So I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I want to thank my principal for allowing me to participate in this today as well, and thank all my faculty, students, staff for holding it down the last 4 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charles. And yet again, as a number of our presenters have displayed that passion for their particular areas of interest and their talks today. So I know that we're almost there at least 12 o'clock Jamaica time. So we've been on for a few hours, but there are a few questions that I'd like to pose. And what I'll do is I'll start by posing a couple of questions from our audience. And these are first directed at Dr. Goodrich. So, Dr. Goodrich, I have a couple of questions from members of the audience for you. The first one is, given the recent attacks, and based on your presentation earlier, I know you had mentioned ransomware and social engineering, in particular phishing, that's prevalent in Trinidad and Tobago, and I can state that they're also quite prevalent here in Jamaica. So given the recent attacks on public critical infrastructure, how susceptible are we in the Caribbean to such attacks?
Okay. Let me just say that, yes, we are susceptible to those attacks. When we talk about critical infrastructure, we are talking about like power stations and massive and telecommunication systems. If that is what the person who asked the question is talking about, yes, we are very susceptible to those types of attacks. And one of the reasons for this is because the systems that are built, like power systems, IT systems that run power companies and stuff like that, used to use what we call proprietary networks and proprietary hardware. However, in the last 10 years or so, there was a movement away from proprietary systems to more open systems and web systems. And because there are more open standards and web systems, it is easier for hackers to get into them as a result. And just to give you some, for example, some examples of where this may be true, in 2015 and 2016, the SWIFT global banking messaging system was attacked. Another example would be when the when the Ukraine system, this is before the Ukraine war, of course, was attacked by the Russians as well. So these are all critical infrastructure systems that were attacked. So in the Caribbean, we are also susceptible to these types of attacks. And in terms of telecommunications, not that I'm putting any ideas out there, but one of the easiest ways to attack the telecommunication systems in the Caribbean would be to target those underlying connections that fiber optic cables that run from country to country. I mean, and once you attack those, then you can bring down the entire communication systems in the Caribbean. As I said already, not that I'm giving anybody any ideas, but so yes, so we are susceptible to critical to attacks on our critical infrastructure.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Goodrich. And so that brings us to the second question, again from our member of our audience. And the question is, does Trinidad and Tobago have a universal e-identifier?
No, not at this time. I would say that if you go on their website, there are they describe it as work in progress. So yes, it's work in progress, but at this time, no. The answer is no to that question. But as I said already, we at the University of West Indies, we have developed an e-identity system, and we want to use this system, or we want an opportunity for us to implement this system in different Caribbean countries. So I mean, we are trying it out there. If any government or if any want to team up with us at the University of West Indies, we are we will welcome the opportunity.
Wonderful. And I know that Jamaica is pretty advanced in the implementation of their national identification system, which includes e-identifiers, also includes the option or ability to have digital signatures and the like. I'm sure it will be educational at least to see what our system is like and Trinidad's, and so at least the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine. So thank you very much, Dr. Goodrich. I just have another question, and this one is for Professor Morris. And again, another very interesting presentation. And it was mentioned at one point during your discussion, Professor Morris, that older adults, particularly in the Caribbean, that they're more and more living alone and living alone for longer. And certainly one of the reasons behind this is the improvement in our healthcare systems. So we're living for longer periods of time. But the question is, there are a number of effects of loneliness. Some, I don't know if you can maybe give us a little bit more information on some of these more deleterious effects on an individual that loneliness either accelerates or something along those lines. What are some of the effects, Professor Morris, that loneliness can have on an older adult, generally speaking?
Thank you. Let me just clarify, I'm not a social scientist, I'm a design engineer. However, I can only speak from my own personal experience and what I've actually seen. So from my perspective, I would say that I am a great believer of the fact that we came on Earth to make relationships and be in relationship with other human beings. So the absence of relationships is detrimental to our human existence. And I think that if we are living longer, more independently and isolated, we are then turning probably to spirituality, especially within the Caribbean, a lot more. We're actually building on our resilience in terms of faith a lot more, but we're also probably susceptible to making what I can only describe as dysfunctional relationships based on an aspect of need for contact and connectivity. So with regards to being older in the Caribbean, it's beautiful. I only wish one day I would be an older adult in the Caribbean. But I would say that there are days when there are longer days. There are times when you might be living in experiences of isolation. And that has a detrimental effect on your health and well-being, your cognition, and through the lack of interaction. So I would say that if you're connected, even connected through telecommunications, through information communication technology, that will help. Being connected doesn't necessarily also mean in the physical connection. It also means being accessible in the virtual as well. So I would say from my perspective, it's clear that being isolated has a negative effect, but there are mitigations with regards to technology and opportunities out there in order to relieve some of the potential stresses associated with that.
Thank you so much, Professor Morris. Yes, there are many advantages to social media, and we're still learning about some of them. And finally, Dr. Charles, you had also mentioned that, and this is an ongoing problem, the ongoing migration of teachers to places and regions outside of the Caribbean. What, in your opinion, do you think is maybe the single most important thing that we can do to sort of stem that flow or reduce the migration of our teachers? And you also described the importance of education and how influential it's been towards conflict reduction and peace in the Caribbean. So, again, what do you think is probably the single most important thing that we could do to address this migration?
I think the single most important thing we could do is to respect teachers, right? Let me give you an example. Why would we think it's okay to put an unqualified person in the classroom? Yet, if we go into the hospital and we need an operation, we would not have somebody who is untrained operating. I mean, someone would say, well, that's oranges and grapes. I say no. The reality is that if we respect teachers, we pay them better. If we respect them, we honor them. And I think when you think of how we see teachers, if they were important to governments, all or many of these challenges that I talked about would have been changed, right? Why should a teacher be teaching in a dilapidated building? Why should a teacher be teaching in a building where there are gunshots like in the US almost every week? Why aren't we thinking that it is important to protect our most vulnerable children and to educate our most vulnerable children if we want a future? Because you see, this is how I think about this, right? As an educator, I'm thinking that our job is to prepare the futures, to prepare our students for the future of work. If we at the university are preparing students for the future of work, I'm examining every faculty that goes in front of that classroom, making sure that that faculty has the credential, making sure that we provide professional development training, making sure that that faculty, if it's an adjunct faculty or full-time faculty, is assessed by the head of the school and by myself, because what we want to do is to ensure that the community and the region excels beyond where we are. That's our goal at Five Island Campus. The goal that we're trying to emphasize on the secondary and elementary school system, it's the same, and that's why we were very happy to see that the Minister of Education gave that 25 scholarships. But though that's 25 scholarships for early childhood, we still have throughout the Eastern Caribbean, a majority, many teachers that are not trained, that are in the classroom, and that cannot continue. So what is going to happen is that these young people who have a passion for teaching, they're going to get the credentials eventually. If the salaries remain low, they're then just going to go to somewhere in the US or one of these countries you mentioned that has the need, who pay them more, who respect faculty, who could give them a green card. And those are things that we do. So respecting is number one. If we respect, we will pay better, and we will treat teachers like a surgeon. If we could do that, we would be able to retain our teachers, we would be able to retain our engineers, we would be able to retain our nurses. Nurses and teachers are two of the lowest paid professions in our region, but two of the most critical, one with you dying and the other one with you raising. So at two ends of the spectrum, we have the ability to really uplift these professions so that we could have them retained within our region. But saying that is important for retaining, but I think we also have a responsibility as education institutions to export teachers, right? I mean, when I say export teachers, if you have the ability to retain more than you have, right? So it's not just only educating those that it's enough. If our people within the region have an aspiration to go and teach in Bangladesh, or go and teach in Mexico, and go and teach in Pakistan, we could have government-to-government relationships with those countries where we could then export, just like what kids did in the 60s in the Peace Corps. We have students who would be willing to do that. So we could export teachers to there, or we could have their teachers, their folks come here to get educated. But those are some of my reactions. But respect is number one. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charles. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Niatuka had to end a bit early today, so he's no longer with us. But we would like to say thank you for his participation. We'd like to say thank you to Dr. Goodrich, Professor Morris, and to you as well, Dr. Charles, for your participation this morning in our second day of the Global Security Perspectives. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to join us today and for posing a few questions and for your participation. And I'd also like to thank the staff and the crew at UETV for their assistance and their ongoing assistance in making this event possible. Ladies and gentlemen, our participants, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll see you tomorrow for our final day, day 3, for our Global Security Perspective Symposium. So that's it from me from here at the Faculty of Science and Technology in Mona, where we like to call it the go-to place for science and technology. Good afternoon, everyone.